You'd really rather hear him. This is Eddy Benoit, president of the Benoit Group, and he's coming in here with nearly 2 decades of experience. Oh, let me remind you again, drinks off the table for the purposes of photographs. Thank you. Okay. He's been involved in over, sounds like well over $1.8 billion worth of development in recent years. An amazing range of multifamily. I love this list. Mixed income, independent senior, workforce, HUD subsidized, student housing, military housing. He's been through it all. Lots of other things I could tell you about him. I think the most interesting thing about him is he has devised, started from basically himself, he's devised a strategy that has built a firm. He has survived, this is a huge thing, he has survived the Great Recession when stellar groups did not. And here he is today with very, very interesting stories. So he's an amazing story of construction. He has a BCN degree from UF and another master's degree from in the same field from what was Southern Polytech State U, now Kennesaw State. We're just really delighted to have an old friend who's a well-regarded member of our board. And so, Eddy, welcome.
Thank you. I don't know, is the mic live? It's on? Okay. Well, thank you, Professor Archer. I need to take you to some of my meetings, when I'm trying to get a loan, because I was listening to you talk about me. I was like, man, I'll probably get a little bit better interest rate, out here in my negotiations. Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing? Good. All right. It seems like that's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Good. So one of the things I'm going to ask everybody to do is just come a little bit closer. We're going to have a good, intimate conversation. If you come a little bit closer, move a little bit closer. Yeah, just come. The ones in the back, come a little bit closer, if you don't mind. Here we go. Come a little bit closer. This is going to be an engaging discussion. Just by a show of hands, how many here are just MSRE candidates? And how many are JD, candidates? You afraid to be a lawyer? MBA, just MBA. Don't have anybody here. Okay. Well, good. All right. Well, we're going to keep this very short. I only have a 10-minute presentation since it's the afternoon, and I know everybody's ready to go. Listen, we had a little chilling chat about 45 minutes ago with a smaller group. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our company, so I apologize if you're having to hear this again. But we'll go quickly through, who we are as far as the Benoit Group. And then I have a pretty interesting project that we're working on in Atlanta that I chose to highlight today. And it's a mixed-use, mixed-income project in downtown Atlanta. It's pretty neat, big project. It's going to have a lot of scrutiny, and it's pretty complicated. So hopefully you'll have a lot of questions. Hopefully I won't be able to answer them. And then I'll just keep it short, So anyhow, let's move forward. This is, the Benoit Group. I'm the founder of the Benoit Group. We started in 2010. That was during the recession. I actually bought my partners out. We had a company that was called the Gambling, companies headquartered in Atlanta. I was one of the 4 owners of the company. We had a pretty medium-sized company of about 1,300 employees. But in 2009, towards the end, we really decided to go different ways. I really wanted to focus on a different business platform that was more low to moderate risk. And my partners really wanted to continue to do more high risk and more speculative type of projects. So it made sense for me to buy the development company and the advisory company from them. Just a little bit about us. we really, pride ourselves not only in the experience that we've had when we had, ambling companies, but the fact that we've been able to retain a lot of great talent. And with that great talent, it's not just the human capital that we have within our organization, but it's the repeat business that we do with some of our major consultants and our attorneys. And you could only imagine how much power that you have from a competitive standpoint out there when you have a team that's continuously worked together on several projects and have seen so many difficult situations. And so, we continue to maintain that same approach and to, keep repeat business, with our consultants and our legal teams as we move forward, on our business agendas. This is some of the key leadership within our organization, which is not just development, but property management and from the finance side of our business. We're headquartered in Atlanta, and we also have an office in Chicago. So our development focus is in the Southeast and in the Midwest. We really penetrated the Midwest in 2012 because we felt as though that it was pretty ripe for developers like us that really focus on creative, financing. I mentioned earlier that all of you in here are learning the science of real estate. When you graduate, you would have mastered the science. But the difference between you, the person to your right, the person to your left, and the people outside that you haven't competed with yet is the art. And unfortunately, these great professors that you have here cannot teach you the art. Either you have it within you or you don't. So we're going to have a discussion today. It's up to you. Do you want to really hear about how it really happens out there, or do you want me to just give you the rhetoric? Let me get a yay for who wants the real deal. You don't want the real deal? You're not sure? You're not sure yet? All right. So here are the product types that we actually focus on as far as our business is concerned. We have the affordable mixed income housing, the independent senior living, student housing, and also workforce housing. Those categories out there, we believe are not necessarily just recession proof, but they're able to help us withstand the real estate cycles. That there's another cycle that's forthcoming. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we know that things are, interest rates are not going to stay this low forever. We enjoy them while they're still low, and we're going to continue to do deals. But nonetheless, when you look at, the projects that we're developing within the Southeast and the Midwest, a lot of it deals with, government type of financing, government type of endorsement, government securities, housing assistant payment contracts, or whether it's the student housing, you're dealing with board of regents and, that kind of situation. From a workforce standpoint, most of these deals are going to be transportation oriented, projects that are going to be urban or suburban, where there is a lack of housing options where everybody works. So it really reduces the commute. We're able to get different types of incentives in order to, develop projects of such. This is some of our development capacity. I'm not going to read through it all, but when you look at, some of the key things that we have, is this a pointer also? The red button. Oh, okay. I guess. One of the key points on this right here is, if you look here, is our public-private partnerships. With these 8 housing authorities over the past, 5 years, we've easily done, over 200 million in HUD finance projects. And this is half of the time in the middle of the recession. And so that really explains, again, why we chose to change our business platform. When you're in the real estate business, if you're going to be in this business for a long time, you're going to have to reinvent yourself many times, especially as you go through different cycles. But what's going to allow you to reinvent yourself many times is really going to be your human and intellectual capital internally. Their ability to adjust, those who are multidimensional, that can actually wear different hats. People who want to be siloed, you know, it's a very dangerous prescription for any development company. And that's why I advise a lot of, you know, those who've been your predecessors here, and even some of you, you know, in the program now, hey, when you're looking at, you know, what's the next step post-graduation, don't just accept a job position. Look for somebody that's going to allow you to have a career opportunity. Because when you go through the downturn, you don't know when it's coming. Nobody sends you an email, Instagram, or whatnot. You just come to work one day, and they call you into a room, and you think you're getting a raise, but they're actually giving you 2 checks. So it's your last day. That's what really happens in the business. That's what happened from 2008 through 2010, 11. And so, you know, these public-private partnerships were very key, you know, for us. And as you look, you know, we've done over 60 plus mixed income developments just over, you know, our tenure in the business alone. These are all the different types of financing that we've used, whether it's a hotel development, hospitality, industrial, affordable housing, student housing, condo. And, you know, sometimes I say, well, it's a great thing to talk about all this we've done here too. But it's also a bad thing, because I tell you, it is very difficult to deal with all this financing. But that's really what separates, you know, certain developers from others too. Your ability to really know how to use some of these different financings, you know, at your disposition in order to look at the different layers in your capital stack, your capital structure, to make a deal that would typically not work become feasible. Anybody here familiar with some of these? Anybody used any of these financing outside of just conventional debt? Nobody? Okay. All right. Just some key relationships as far as these public-private partnerships that we're showing here. I'm not going to go through full detail. Just our experience. I also highlighted, you know, some projects that we've developed with some of these different housing authorities. And since today the conversation is really to focus more on mixed income and mixed finance, mixed use project, that's why I chose these projects here. But this really just shows, you know, just like a project like this, it's 150 units, independent senior housing. And this development right here, looks, you know, pretty decent looking. It's about 5 years old, 100% subsidized. Zero equity in the project. $1.8 million developer fee, fully paid. Project completed on time. Cash flows over $1,300 per unit. Zero taxes. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, like, how did this happen? We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that. I got your attention now, huh? Okay. Just a few more. Some of the stuff we have here in Illinois, and also around here. This is a project that we're actually doing right now. This is interesting, very interesting, because it's in one of the highest zip codes in Atlanta. High rent, NIMBYism, Sandy Springs. Across the street, literally across the street from a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Okay, so it needs to say anything else. But see, the housing authority owned this building 40 years ago. And it was what is called outside the perimeter of the city of Atlanta. Well, that outside the perimeter is literally, you know, like 1/8 of a mile outside the perimeter. Well, now, today, this has become one of the highest zip codes, high rent areas, and so that building has a lot of value. So we've been able to partner with the Housing Authority, Fulton County Housing Authority, on this deal, and we're able to get 9% tax credits, re-syndicate this into a senior development. And so at the end of the day, you know, a project like this, not only will we have zero in it, we'll have 20 years of guaranteed housing assistance payment from the federal government for 96% of the gross revenue potential on this project. However, the building in our joint venture partnership, we're 70%, the housing authority's 30%, is worth about 10 times more than what we thought it would actually be valued at when we started looking at the deal 3.5 years ago. Because it's prime real estate. And you can't build any other senior development that will work in Sandy Springs because of the zoning requirements. Any high-rise multifamily that you develop, the minimum one-bedroom size needs to be 1,300 square feet and up. Well, that doesn't work. Can't build it. Nobody will pay for it. So, just a couple of little, you know, other stuff that we do as it relates to, you know, our advisory side of our business. I've got here stuff we've done overseas, our student housing. So you guys can ask me more questions on that, but I really want to kind of get into the meat of this since I talked about this a little bit earlier with the other group. Project we're going to talk about today is historic Auburn Avenue redevelopment. Anybody here been to Atlanta? Show of hands. Been to downtown Atlanta? Done the tour, King Center, all those places? Well, great. Well, this project here is extremely, extremely near and dear to us, you know, to our team. We've worked on it, you know, for many years. It was a very competitive RFP. And a lot of other, you know, national players competed. The Big Bethel Church, which is AME Church in Atlanta, it's one of the oldest AME church in Atlanta itself, 168 years. So it's in what is called historic Auburn Avenue. They hired Central Atlanta Progress, which is an entity, nonprofit entity that is the mayor's office actually oversees to really help spur economic development within the city of Atlanta. And so they're able to look at deals, help put together RFPs for other, you know, groups like churches where they normally wouldn't have the money to hire a consultant to oversee the process for them. So Central Atlanta Progress does that. So they were very instrumental in putting together the RFP, overseeing the response process, the interviews, and our team was selected. We have a partner in this deal, which is called H.J. Russell Company. We're the lead master developer, but they're focused primarily on the construction side of it. But going back to historic Auburn, not only the church being there for 168 years, you know, Auburn Avenue, back in the 50s and 60s, there's a 1-mile stretch that is considered back then the richest 1-mile stretch of African American businesses back then. And so anything, when you start reading about African American history, what happened pre-MLK and post-MLK, and the King Center is literally a block up the street, everything reverts back to this area right here of Auburn Avenue and this church, Big Bethel Church. So you can only imagine everybody who's who, African American, Caucasian, whoever's been an Atlantan is looking at this project here. And when we did our ceremonial MOU signing last month, I mean, every media picked it up just for, you know, in our minds, it's a little deal, but for the city, it's a big deal. So I chose to talk about that today because I think it's pretty neat as far as what, you know, the task that we have at hand relative to the project itself. as you can see here on this, this shot, this is where the church is. This is Auburn Avenue, and the Big Bethel Church is here. We're dealing with an existing tower of 180 units, which will be totally redeveloped. And then they have a 2.5 acre, parcel that is now a surface parking lot. But you'll see here, we program multifamily student housing here, parking deck, and retail below it. This here is where Georgia State is. Interesting enough, we, our group, we developed the Georgia State, project, which is the largest single-phase student housing deal ever done in the country. It was a $160 million deal that helped Georgia State grow into what it is today. The initial project was for 200 beds. Georgia State was a commuter school, and they wanted student housing downtown, and they were like, well, we'd like to do 200 beds. And so here's the difference again between the science and the art. We asked them, if you were to dream, if we allowed you to dream and to get whatever you want besides the 200 beds, how many units would you go for? They're like, well, maybe 400. They're like, really? We're like, look, you have an opportunity here to become the largest university in the Georgia university system because of your location. They really couldn't see the forest for the trees. They really couldn't. They thought we were really on something different, and you should see their faces. And the more we got into it, we're like, well, we're going to need to bring more land to the table and make this happen. And by the time we were done with the whole master plan and negotiation, we had 2,000 beds, 3,000 parking deck parking deck, over 40,000 square feet of retail, library, $160 million, 100% tax-exempt bond finance project. Finished 4 months ahead of time during the recession. They made a savings in the double digits. The reason why they got all that money is because every time I kept telling them that we had that amount of savings, they didn't believe us. They thought something went wrong. So when we were like, you know what, there's only so many upgrades we can do now. Here's the money. They leveraged, I can't tell you the exact number, but it's in the teens. They leveraged that money during the recession and bought all these properties, 40, 50, 30 cents on the dollar. Became one of the largest real estate owners downtown and expanded their school. Started a football team. Can't beat UF, but yeah, but that's, just to give you a little context here, as far as what we're dealing with, across the street. So literally, this picture right here shows you, this is the church, this is the tower, and this is the student housing, and here's the retail. And literally, another close-up. This is Georgia State dorms, 4 buildings, 4 high-rise buildings. Some of the best views of the city. If I were going to school there, well, a lesser degree, of course. I'd probably be on a 5-6 year program based on the type of units these students have. I mean, it is really cool. So we did this, and literally this site, this 2.5 acre site, is where we actually had, it was our laydown area for all the construction materials and contractors' offices and whatnot. On this 2.5 acres, we rented it from them there. And we never knew somewhere down the road we'd actually be developing these 2.5 acres. So it's a pretty neat project, as you can see. We have 2 buildings here, up to about 14 stories that it allows us to build to. Close to about 320 units, and then we have retail below on both of these streets here. And then this high-rise will be the senior development that we will totally, which will be a total gut out. This gives you another view with the parking deck, and this is Georgia State here. And the only difference in this perspective is that up until recently, we're kind of deciding as to whether or not we want to have 2 parking decks and have one that is just going to be solely for the residential and another one that will service the church's needs, and also there will be just for daily, paid parking. This is like your retail programming will be, what you would see here around campus. There's just existing floor plans in the independent senior living. And, these are some of the changes, just opening it up, tearing down walls. So again, it's a total gut rehab. In student housing, yes. Yeah, we actually totally disagree with that. We really believe there is a symbiotic relationship between the more mature adult life and the more, the younger population. These seniors, they're 62 and older. Like on this project, it won't be 55 and older. And there've been many studies done whereby seniors that live close to college campuses get, it delays dementia, Alzheimer's. They get reintegrated into college life, some audit classes. In the state of Georgia, I think I was talking about this week. I think it's 62 or 65 where you could actually go to school for free in the state of Georgia. Your tuition is free. So they get involved in the arts. They get involved in the sports, because it's right there. They're not living with the students. They're just living, in the vicinity, especially when you're looking at an urban situation. That building is totally segregated from what's going to happen from a senior standpoint, from a student standpoint. No. Everything's separated. Yeah, so, the senior deal it has its own deck. It's hard to see in this picture. There's a deck with this building right now that's in the back of it. They have their own common areas. Most of the senior common areas are more internal as opposed to external. Okay, but then remember, you're not in Gainesville, so they're not the pretty lawns that you're walking through as you're going through the Rights Union and whatnot. That doesn't exist. This is an urban campus. So you're in buildings all day. When you come out, you're looking at asphalt. You barely see grass. So, that's just the reality of it. Yeah. It's informal because of the proximity. Yes. These are just some of the, the features that you'll see in, our student housing development as far as the interior fenestration, and then how we're trying to animate, the sidewalks with more al fresco dining, because in the evenings around this time, these students, they've been in buildings all day. They haven't seen a patch of grass, and they can't wait to get out, have drinks, libations, have a good time. And again, it's still indoor, so we're trying to activate and animate, the street side as because we have pretty decent weather during the spring, summer, autumn, but then, our winter is kind of up and down. This is Georgia State, the Georgia State deal across the street, just to give you a perspective. This is how massive it is. You see it from the interstate, and that's what's literally across the street from this Auburn redevelopment that we're working on. Just a couple of projects that we've done. We've developed on over 55 campuses in the tune of close to $2 billion in student housing development with over 14,000 beds over the past decade. All right, so now I've given you a background on us, a background on the project. So I think there is we're gonna take a look at the deal itself and how we're gonna put this deal together. This is the financing structure that we're dealing with on all the components. We have conventional debt, private equity, tax credit equity, HUD insured financing, tax abatements, through ground lease structures, tax allocation districts. I think they call them TIFs here. Tax increment financing, districts, okay. TIF districts, community development block grants, tax exempt bonds, new market tax credits, HAP contracts, and housing opportunity bonds. That's all the pieces, in the financing. Take a quick look at this. Have you guys run a pro forma with all these types of financing yet? Trust me, it's a daunting task. So we have a tiger by the tail, but it is pretty exciting because the good thing is that we've actually worked on all these components before. We are actively working on these components on other projects, but not to this extent on any one project. So here's the mixed use plan. 320 units, student housing, 30,000 square feet of retail. We have 180 unit independent senior living, 800, parking spaces, which will most likely end up being, split between two decks. And then there's some ancillary space that's on Auburn Avenue that the church actually owns. And they would love to see some of the proceeds that they get from selling the tower into the new partnership and the land get redeployed and developing some of that retail along Auburn Avenue. Here are the benefits, as we talked about. They get to pay off debt. They get to redevelop, this tower because it's in real poor condition, structurally sound, but real poor condition. They get long-term residual cash flow in the partnership with us. And they're able to get a reversion of the tower because we're getting developer fees, cash flow over 20 years. Part of the deal is that at the end of the 20 years, we actually give them back, the building, $1 over whatever the remaining debt is. And by the way we're going to finance this project with HUD insured financing, it allows them to assume the loan 100% for a very nominal amount of money. So when you're dealing with churches, one of the big things that you have to contend with is that you have part of the folks in the church want to sell and some don't want to sell, and it continues to be a huge battle. You will never get a deal done. So if you're coming in with just a solution where you're going to buy, you're not going to get a deal. You have to structure something where they feel as though that they'll have that real estate at some point, later on. So ground leases is something that they welcome, very much. 112 million, maybe 120 million, probably not less. That's our guesstimate right now, just on some order of magnitude numbers. You have a quick question, Ola? The tower is existing. The church actually went to that Central Atlanta Progress Group and said, we have 2.5 acres, we'd like to get, solicit, bids, RFP responses, blah, 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 from developers to come with the highest and best use for the 2.5 acres. And oh, by the way, if you're able to figure out what to do with the high rise, let us know. Well, everybody else looked at tearing down the high rise. We didn't. Because one of the key things that they forgot, even though we had very strong competition, is that, they have a mandate to provide affordable housing. The AME Church preserve affordable housing. But if you tear down this high-rise building, then you're going to build another high-rise. You won't be able to provide affordable rents. So we believe that was one of the things that really took us, to the top as far as getting selected. Major relocation. Every tenant will be relocated in proximity. And the only good thing is that it's only 180 tenants at max. Some will go on properties that we have, and then some will go just on third party. So what we do is they'll have a 12-month, you sign us a 12-month lease, and we have to fund the relocation process. The move to the new place, reconnection fees, and their move back. So they go from living, when you look at their unit today versus what it's going to look like afterwards, it is definitely worth it. Yes. No, it's going to be a one-time renovation. So the idea is that we want to take a 12-month period to renovate it because there's some other things from the tax credit side that really trigger, some negative impacts on your financing and your equity if you don't do it within that 12-month period. So therefore, we'll relocate them after everybody. It'll be a staggered move-in, so you won't have 108 people moving in at the same time. But so you'll have mostly, all the leases will be for somewhere about 13 to 14 months. So the people on the tail end, they'll probably have to stay there a little bit longer because you only have 2 elevators in these buildings. So you can only have so many moves per day. It's not hard to weigh your return. It's just part of the business. It's a part of, how that financing works. You go into it knowing that you have tax credit limits that are federally issued on an annual basis on a per state area, and then based on the market area that you're in. So if you're in an MSA, if you're not in an MSA, all that is set up. And so before you move forward on the deal, hey, sometimes you can't even get the max rent. So it's not a matter of whether or not, your max rent for one bedroom can be $1,000, but the market can only support 900. So, you still, as I was saying earlier, you still have to use the same principles. You have to do your market analysis and to see, it's not an affordable deal, it's a real estate transaction. What works? What will be the value of this building once it's renovated? This $22 million renovation, including acquisition, what will it be worth, 10 years from now? Right in the heart of downtown Atlanta, which, by the way, is going through a redevelopment, search. again, 112 million. You know, we're probably plus or minus, 15%. But these are some of the things, the programming, for the tower of 180 units that we would focus on. And all of these features right here are important because they allow you to actually meet the threshold requirements in order to get your federal tax credit funding. And you say, okay, well, why is this so important? Well, this is why it's important. The total development project is 15 million, here. Oh, it's supposed to be 22 million. There's a mistake here. But look at the structure of the financing. 11 million in tax-exempt bonds, non-recourse debt, day one. Anybody here don't know what non-recourse debt is? So the construction financing is non-recourse, which means you have no risk on that 11 million. Number two, with this type of financing, it automatically converts into permanent financing, which means there's no resizing risk. No resizing automatically happens. Y'all have heard of mini-perm financing? Anybody know what a mini-perm financing is? No? Well, mini-perm financing is when you actually, develop the project. You have a construction loan that's fully funded. But guess what? All the brilliant pro forma maneuvering and whatnot, you thought you were going to get an NOI of $2 million, but it's not performing as such. You didn't do your due diligence well. You're not hitting the rents. Your expenses are totally off. Your lease up is off. You've never stabilized. You've never gone for what is called a 90-90. 90 days consecutively at 90% occupancy, and to hit your pro forma NOI, which is what the permanent debt is going to replace, how the permanent debt is going to replace the construction debt. So you have a debt of $10 million, but you can only support a permanent financing now based on the true operations of the project for $9.5 million, which means you have a $500,000 shortfall. It could be even greater. You don't want to pull that out your pocket. So you go get a 2-year mini-perm or a 3-year mini-perm. It really bridges that period of time. Higher interest rate, you've got to pay fees, the whole nine, it's just another loan, until you're able to get a permanent financing. Some people go beyond the mini-perm, go 5 years. Deal never works, and guess what? You have to turn the keys over. Plus everything you have in your account, because it's fully recourse. Federal tax credits, 7 million. State tax credits, 3 million. We've got 10 million in equity going in that I do not have to repay, but that go into the equity value of the project. These investors get their money back, that yield of anywhere from 6 to 7.5% over a 10-year stream of income tax reduction from both the federal and the state level. The federal is 10 years, the state is 1 year. CDBG funds, which is a community development block grant, $500,000. Developer equity, you like this number? 0. Invest Atlanta housing opportunity bonds, $500,000, 22 million. You remember the slide before? 2 million in developer fee, 0 equity, average cash flow of $225,000 a year. Can anybody calculate that IRR for me? Who's smart enough to calculate that IRR? There's no IRR, though, because there's no investment. 0 investment. Does it sound like a pretty good deal? Huh? Who would do this deal in here? Show of hands. You just don't know what you want to do, man. Like, you're just so iffy. You're like, man, I don't know, you know. I was just picking on you. So that's the independent senior living. This is how we're proceeding with this deal. Uh-huh. Yes, a lot of work. And also, every deal that you do is going to require a lot of work. If you realize a deal comes too easy, you better be really careful. There's no easy deal. There's no easy closing. And so, yes, what I'm looking at here is, you know, we've put, these are pretty modest numbers as far as the 225 for you. I mean, it really grows up to like $300,000-$400,000. We just took a simple average. And it is worth it because the developer fee is really our developer profit. So our overhead, time spent, we actually are able to recoup, you know, that too, a good part of that. So let's say we're able to quantify, let's say $300,000 of time expended, you know, in doing this. Yes, we'd get that back. Every dollar we spent also from a pursuit and due diligence to get it to closing is reimbursed. It becomes project cost. So it's included in this $22 million. So by the time we close this deal, we may, you know, it's a possibility that we'll have, say, about $600,000 to $700,000, $750,000 out in pursuit costs to get it to closing. At closing, they'll reimburse at least 99% of it. And then we may have a schedule of, you know, our time. Usually I can't really put my time in as owners, but these non-owners you can show that overhead. And so you can get it two ways. Either you segregate the overhead and you get a certain fee, or your fee is maxed, including, you know, overhead. So we could have easily said, we get a $2.3 million fee. We did not want to disclose the overhead breakdown, or we get a $2 million fee and we got a $350,000 overhead breakdown. Okay, yes, definitely. So you have two types of bonds. Either they're taxable or tax exempt. And usually tax exempt bonds need to be used for a general purpose. So anybody should be able to, you know, benefit of whatever development that is financed with tax exempt bonds. So many times you can't, it's hard to do a tax exempt bond deal unless it's owned by, like with a university, it's got to be owned by a university foundation in order for it to be open for, earmarked for students. However, it's for the general population of students. It's not segregating what type of students can actually utilize the facility that's being developed under the tax exempt bonds. But like in the state of Georgia, for example, you know, this project here, you have the tax exempt bonds and you have federal tax credits. Well, there are two different tax credits out here. And I didn't want to go into too much detail, but since you asked the question, you have 9% tax credits and 4% tax credits. Your 9% tax credits, you have to compete for them, and is through a qualified allocation plan on a state level. And it's very competitive. In the state of Florida, you go through a lottery system. It's not even based on merit of the project, which is why a lot of developers stay out of Florida, because you can have the best deal and it never gets awarded because it's a lottery. In other states, the majority of the states is based on scoring. the higher your scoring, and the more targeted, your project is in areas where they really want to focus on development or redevelopment, then the higher the likelihood of you getting your deal awarded. But as you can see, you have 9% and 4%. Well, your 9% credits award more money, more tax credits to the project. And people love those because you typically would put, some deals are so strong where you can do it with zero debt. But typically your leverage on that deal is no more than about 20% debt. However, on the 4%, you're getting half of that tax credit. It's not competitive. All you have to do is meet some threshold requirements for the state agency. And you can walk in and submit your application, and as long as it gets approved, you will be awarded these 4% credits anytime during the year. And with this right here, we're dealing with 4% tax credits here because it's guaranteed, as long as we do everything we're supposed to do. But you can only do tax-exempt bonds with 4% tax credit deals. You can't do tax-exempt bonds with 9% because it's just too much. I mean, you're just getting too much money. And the federal government's not going to allow you to do that. They're like, we're not going to give you 9% credits, and then we're going to give you tax-exempt bonds on top of it. But the tax-exempt bonds that we get, to get to the answer here, is based on, in the state of Georgia, we have a certain allocation of industrial revenue bonds that are not used in the state. And these bonds, at some point throughout the year, when they realize, let's say maybe it's October, November, like, look, 70% of the capacity has not been tapped into. So they're able to convert those into multifamily, revenue bonds. And so now that bond capacity, can be used for affordable housing development. Some of it also, I don't know much about the single family part, but there are single family deals that are developed with bond financing, tax-exempt bond financing, but they also enjoy, some of the same restrictions as it relates to the buyers, the purchasers' income, and based on area income level, based on the area median income, and based on their ability to own it, be fully vested in that house after a certain number of years of occupancy. So that program, I don't know much about it on the single family side because we don't do that, but I do know that it is out there too, and some single family developers have used it. So from a tax exempt standpoint, those bonds, we're able to take that allocation. You go through what is called an inducement process, which is a public hearing through some type of development agency, and you present your project, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, all right, and they review it, and they're like, hey, anybody in the general public, opposes to the project, does this make sense? Do we like it? Here's some comments. And let's say everything is great, they approve your bond inducement. And let's say here we have 11 million. Typically we'll go in and ask for maybe $1 million above, just in case the project gets bigger or whatever. But you're not locked into that number. You just don't want your number to be too low and have to go back again. And so at after you get your bond inducement, you go through what is called a bond allocation. So you actually get a reservation for, what is your name? Francesca. So Francesca Development LLC, you receive $11 million bond allocation reservation for this project. And then there's another thing called a TEFRA hearing, which the day they actually sign it and make sure it's all set up, it's legit, then it's open to the general public. Usually nobody comes. They advertise it in the local newspaper for about 2 weeks and whatnot, and it's just more of a formality than anything else. That bond reservation that you have, allocation, let's say you didn't do the deal for 7 years. Until somebody comes in and contests that bond, it's still yours. I know, I've been down that road. Okay, it's still yours. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. There's a time limit on the tax, whether it's 9% or 4%. If you can't use them, you got to put them back in. Now, that's a bad situation when you have to turn back a tax credit allocation. You better believe you're not going to get many more through that state agency. You know, so those bonds, now you get this, you go through your TEFRA hearing, those bonds are sold just like regular paper in Wall Street. And they're able to enjoy an interest rate that has a very low spread than your typical conventional market rate debt or bank debt or life insurance debt out there. So give you an example, this project here, we're running the pro forma at 4.3% interest rate. I know because I saw it this morning. So it's 4.3. And that is on a 40-year amortization, not 30, 40-year amortization, 4.3%. Last two deals that we closed this year, we closed with 40-year AMs, 3.9%, 3.8%. 40 years. You can't get that debt anywhere. If you can, let me know. Can't. You can't get the amortization. You can't get the non-recourse. You can't get the automatic final endorsement where your debt, your construction debt is automatically converted into permanent financing. There's no resizing risk, even if your NOI was slashed in 50%. Yes, sir.
When it comes to your financing, like the previous slide you had, you said plus different financial structures.
Uh-huh.
Is there an order of preference that you use to try to get to that? Like, if I can't get this $11 million tax credit, then there's no pursuing the rest of the project afterwards regardless. But is there a preferential route that you take, or do you hit them all at the same time? And
No.
just,
So remember I talked about the science and the art? So an artist has a whole bunch of paintings, right, and paint brushes. He or she just doesn't just start going crazy like it. This is the art, buddy. Right here, this is the science of it, as far as, you know, how you get to the financing. Where do you go do it? I mean, everybody who's in the business knows how to submit a tax credit application, get a bond allocation and whatnot. First, you got to figure out the strategy, the creative financing. So we had to sit down and figure, okay, how best do we structure this deal? What all different ingredients will be really appropriate for this deal? From a risk perspective, from a timing perspective, from a competitive perspective, from an availability perspective, and also we'll make sure that the residual value of the real estate is going to be equal to or greater than what the total investment is from day one. Yes.
You mentioned that there's oftentimes extra allowances left over for bond funding. Is there a reason that more developers aren't tapping into this sort of financing?
Yeah.
Why they're not using it?
They don't want to go through all this, you know, brain damage. I started off with an afro, by the way. So they don't. They don't. And you know, you have to have a team that also lives and breathes this every day, that knows this inside and out. It is a totally different industry, and as I mentioned earlier, but it's the reason why those who are in it, they don't get out. And I remember we were talking about, you know, affordable housing. They don't get out because if you figured out how to do it and do it right, especially some of these 9% deals. Give you an example. I have a deal in Champaign, Illinois, University of Illinois. It's a small affordable housing deal. And that project was it was the first of several deals that we're doing out there with that housing authority. The project was about $7-8 million total. The debt was zero. It was zero. We had to add some extra stuff to get a debt of $160-some thousand. 56 units, about $150-some-thousand. It's across from, literally across the street from University of Illinois. And I've got project-based vouchers for 15 years guaranteed for all the residents in there. And I have a tax abatement. So that project cash flows about $2,100 to $2,200 per unit, per door. Free cash flow. Zero equity. And we manage the property too, our management company. You had a question?
What is the major factor that puts you ahead of the competition in the market? I mean, is it just creative financing?
Yes.
Other factors?
Yes. The creative financing, but also the partnership structures, the P3 structure. We've taken a conventional approach as it relates to, typically you see P3 structures with mixed-use deals. And we've taken that same real estate concept and have applied it to the affordable housing mixed income industry. Again, if there's anything that you learn today, this evening, is that what you're being taught here, the principles of real estate, regardless of what type of real estate you're doing, remains the same. They're applicable. I don't care if you're just building chicken coops on farmland and you're selling chicken. There's a real estate transaction here. It may be more operational, but it's a real estate transaction. You've got to do your due diligence, your market analysis, your evaluation, all your projections, figure out your exit strategy on the front end. You should never go into a deal not knowing how you're going to get out. I mean, these are just some, just some simple, tips, as when you leave here, when's the graduation? May? All right. So this is the independent senior living, structure. Then you got the student housing, retail, and parking. Build out, 58 million, maybe 60 million on student housing. Retail, about 4.5 million. And developer fee, 2.5 million. And you're like, wow. You see the market rate deal, the conventional deal? It's $2.5 million on $65 million of risk. Developer fee. $2 million on a $22 million development. Zero risk. Takes both of them to make this mixed-use development work. Because my competitors who didn't win, they didn't want to deal with what we just talked about here. They're like, let's just tear this building down or turn it into a condo development. That doesn't work. We're figuring about $39 million in debt. We're going to go non-recourse. So you see my equity is pretty strong, 22 million. We're looking at about maybe close to 60% debt. We believe we can get non-recourse. There's non-recourse money out here at 60% debt, but your equity is pretty stout, which means we have to bring in a capital partner for that $22 million, who's going to look for somewhere around a 9 to 9.5, 10% preferred return. Anybody knows what a preferred return is? You know what it is? What is it?
The rent that they get with the structure.
That's right. So they get the first slice, at the pie. And that first slice may be the entire pie, depending on how it's performing. Which means we're on the back end, depending on how big of a participation we have in this 22 million here. So we're willing to mitigate our risk, which is non-recourse debt, and give up some upside and hope that it outperforms what we're projecting in order to probably make it on the back end versus risk so much in order to get it on the front end. So when you're negotiating out here, you don't always have to hit that home run on the front end of the deal. Always look at your risk, because there's nothing guaranteed in these numbers. We're only projecting numbers. If anybody is in here is able to tell me exactly what the numbers are going to be on a pro forma, then you do not need to be in this program right here. You need to be selling advice to every developer out here. That's basically what it boils down to. And you never plan on doing a bad deal either. So, tax incentives, $4 million. We think it could be double that amount because we're in a tax allocation district. And there's been a lot of money collected in that TAD that haven't been used. It's in that area of downtown. So why? Remember I told you what Georgia State did? They went in with all this money. They leveraged up about over $100 million of real estate acquisition after they got this savings. Well, when they did that, they took away all this tax base to the city because they don't pay taxes. It's a great thing for them, bad thing for the city. Drive around downtown Atlanta, outside of the path that the mayor travels, the roads are pretty bad. So that's an issue. Thus, why Georgia State and some other schools have gone towards the privatization of their housing is really to reintroduce, the tax base, for the municipality. Same thing for us. The church, nonprofit, doesn't pay any taxes. Us redeveloping this project will generate taxes, both from a property and sales tax. Parking deck, straightforward, 800 spaces, somewhere about, $15 million so plus or minus. They're not, you really don't try to put a whole lot of fees in there because that's straight capital. I mean, when you look at it, you've got debt, we're looking at 60% debt, 40% equity, somewhere thereabout. Now, we do have an opportunity for new market tax credits, yet to be quantified, because there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that. So we believe that our equity number here of $6 million can potentially come down by a couple of million or so dollars, which would be great, for the deal. Be great for us too. Economic impact, CRA investment opportunities for lenders, syndicators through the affordable housing deal, better housing options for Georgia State, students and retail experience. We talked about property taxes and sales taxes from the retail. These students will be spending, downtown, more retail, and not just our retail, but it will actually really be a stimulus for more retail, downtown. Downtown's been hurting for a while, and Georgia State really has been a catalyst for redevelopment downtown too. Of course, the redevelopment of the historic church, increased parking. Oh, the MARTA ridership. MARTA is our transit, both rail and rubber tires. And we also have the streetcar that goes through downtown now and is introduced this past summer. It started operating. So that increase is more ridership, for us. More jobs, more residents, and more spending. Any questions? Just on that, I have something that I want to do real quick. I'm looking at my time. But I need a couple of volunteers. And I want to show you on this, the affordable housing deal that we're looking at. I'll go back to So when we do this deal, we'll have all of these components, for sure. Maybe one or two extra, but that will be free money, so we'll definitely go after it. So, all right. Since you're an attorney, I want to show you all the people who are involved in this, that will be involved in this transaction, not including the development team. You're going to be the bond lawyer. You're an attorney too, so you're the borrower lawyer. Who else is an attorney here? You're going to be an attorney today. You're the housing authority's lawyer. You're a HUD's lawyer. You're the issuer's lawyer. You're the lender's lawyer. You're the other lawyer that's just going to be a pain in the rear. It just comes out of nowhere. No pun intended. You're going to be the partner's lawyer. You're going to be another partner's lawyer. You're the state agency's lawyer. You're the syndicator's lawyer. For the federal, you're the state syndicator's lawyer. Start over here. You guys are too far. Over here. You are the underwriter's lawyer. You are a lender. You're a HUD's lender. You're the lender for the state agency. You're the federal syndicator. You're the state syndicator. You're equity. And you're the trustee. All the money has to run through you. Everybody that I gave a card, please stand up. As a commercial real estate developer, you need to know enough to deal with every single one of these people. It's the real deal. None of this is in your textbooks. It's the real deal. Everybody comes with their own agendas, their own personalities, whether they like you or dislike you, or like the deal or dislike the deal, or really favored their other client as far as getting the deal, or you're dealing with NIMBYism, or it's your neighborhood or not. Everybody has something to say. As you see, how many lawyers do we have? Raise your hand. How many lawyers do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You know what the legal fees are going to run? Over 1.5 million. So, it's the reality, guys. You know, that's exactly, you can sit down. I wanted you guys to go through that and see exactly what all is involved. That doesn't include dealing with interior designers, architects, contractors, and all the other disciplines that you show on your pro forma. And, you know, some people talk about being a jack or a Jane of all trades or a master or a mistress of none. No, you can't be of none. You have to be of some in this business. So, here we go. Go Gators. Questions? We've got about, 5, 7 minutes. Go ahead, John. Yeah. The real story is, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and my mother used to work in Manhattan. And so, you know, my dad would take her to Manhattan, and she worked for a New York Life Insurance Company. And she worked in the evenings, you know, 4 days a week, like 11 hours. And so one day, I was about 3 or 4, she told me, I remember asking her this question. I said, well, why is there a whole other country? I was a kid, on the other side of the water. And everybody lives here. And she said, well, it's because somebody had a vision. And they felt as though what they're going to build over there would actually they could bring the world to it, which is Manhattan. And the world comes to Manhattan. We've all, I think, pretty much, been to Manhattan, enjoyed Manhattan. And I was like, wow, how did they know how to do that? And again, she said, it was really the vision. And, since then, I was like, well, I'd love to be able to do the same thing too. I want to go build my own Manhattan one day. And then I was like, well, how do I go about doing that? And she said, of course, you need to do well in school, clean your bedroom, and, do your chores, and then you stop eating candy and, in your bed, that kind of stuff. But more importantly, she said, well, typically, people who are in that industry who are able to develop things like this have more of a technical background in engineering and stuff, civil engineering or construction. And, from that point on, I've always had really more of an affinity, towards really understanding, big buildings. I would remember just when you're driving through Manhattan, when you're a kid, you can't, even today, you can't even see the buildings. I would stick my head out the window to try to see the top of the buildings, and I was always in amazement as far as that was concerned. And believe it or not, when I came here to UF, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it was, two things. One, major in civil engineering, because I wasn't even aware we had a BCN program. I thought we only had it for a master's program, okay? And two is pleasure fraternity, which is Omega Psi Phi fraternity. So I did the two things and had a good time, so.
How do you feel, I guess, majoring in BCM compared to more development? And would you go back and still do that, or would you have found it? I guess also, what was your best BCM?
Yeah, BCN, yes, BCN. BCN was just great. I can't even put a number, behind how much, it has helped me. But it's not just having a BCN degree. It's also being out there and getting the true practical experience. Because I've actually, built out project manager on projects, so I understand how projects get built. So what I do recommend, what did happen for me, was that there was an older gentleman who advised me while I was here as to, while I was in the BCN, he asked me, what do you want to do? You want to be a superintendent, or do you want to be a project manager? I told him, well, I want to be the CEO of a company, but be in development at some point. And he said, well, you need to really take on some more finance classes. I'm like, really? as electives. I'm like, really? Like, these classes are already hard enough. You want me to take my elective classes? I want to take theater appreciation, we had a class back then called The Meat We Eat. This is fun. All the nice girls are in that class. It's an easy A. It's still around. Yeah, I'm like, there you go. Sex education, I was like, that's what those are classes that I want to take. And I was like, no, take accounting too. Take finance. And I don't know, typically I was like, I decided to take accounting too. And then, accounting was, I can't say pretty easy. It wasn't as challenging, for me, and basically took some more economic and finance classes. I don't know if today you can do that here, but they didn't have minors at University of Florida when I was at University of Florida. So you couldn't even, I think I took enough classes where I could have minored in finance if I wanted to. And it was great for me because it really gave me a strong background in finance while really I was in building construction. So it allowed me to grow pretty quickly, as far as my career was concerned with the different employers that I had, so. Former partners? How they like me now? you know, they're doing different. Unfortunately, for them, they ended up separating the other three. The company was taken over by the bank about a year and a half after we separated. And the construction company went defunct, and the management company what was left was just the management company, because I bought development and advisory. And so up until recently, one of the partners who was working for the bank at this point and became an employee, was able to bring in a partner to buy the debt, repay the debt through an equity infusion. So they own all of the assets in the management company. But again, he has a small participation on the upside, but really, you know, it's really just kind of like, you know, a glorified salary type situation. So we stay in touch, and, you know, it's just, we all make different decisions in life, you know. Well, I didn't foresee the recession. I started feeling it. So, and when you see Countrywide Bank, Home Bank, you know, those banks just overnight go under. We were doing a deal with Washington Mutual, was the lender. Well, I moved, okay? And, you know, JP Morgan, you know, acquired them. The week that we're closing on this deal, 292 unit deal, was this same week they were going under. Okay? And so that, I mean, do you imagine you're waiting, I mean, you're about to close to fund. You're in closing mode. All right? And then they're now not responding. Okay? You're sending closing statements out, they're not responding, like, what's going on? And then you see the news flash on TV, Washington Mutual, you know, going under. Then you're like, okay, guess what? You know, I need to, you know, change some things around and really take the, you know, the path of least resistance, whereby you can't continue to do deals because you have to do deals. And that was the thing, you know, we still had this huge infrastructure. We continued to operate, my partners and I, for the next couple of years after '07. And we're like, okay, we have this budget in order to operate like this and maintain status quo, so we've got to go do X number of deals. That's bad business. You have to do deals that make sense. There may be a year where you do no deal, and that's the best thing you can do. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have strong reserves, retained earnings, strong people working with you, dedicated. And you also have to have strong residual cash flow. That's why these deals, some people go after developer fees, they care less about the cash flow. Well, guess what happens to an asset that has a very, very thin cash flow? Well, over time, the trending of operating expenses, which are greater than what your income increases will be, you know, will put you in a situation where your cash flow continues to fall. So you're looking at a debt service coverage ratio that declines over time. Because most people, they'll run their pro formas and say, oh, we're going to trend the rent at 3%, and we're going to just put expenses at 45% or 47% or whatever. That's not true, because taxes and insurance don't increase by 3%. Right? We don't. You could do everything right, and there was a small fire, a small claim, and your insurance just goes up 17%. And you paid your deductible and you paid your premiums on time. It's just that simple. So So we had to change and go to more service, and thus the birth of the consulting group, the advisory group. So we were doing more development services, program management, and construction management. But we're doing them for a fee. We had no risk. Our pursuit cost was virtually nil, other than a plane ride somewhere, a hotel. I mean, it's nothing. So we were really operating on somebody else's dime, kind of like the lawyers. So, does that answer your question? All right. Any other questions? Go ahead. Where do you go to find them? Well, they're all available. They're there. It's just a matter of, it's either you're in the business or you're not. And I tell people, you know, the affordable housing industry is really totally different. I mean, it's kind of like you have real estate here, and then you have affordable housing that kind of, it's its own little bubble over here. It's everything that's opposite of what you would do on just a regular deal. You know, if we're going to build an office building, you know, we do our due diligence, we get debt and equity, done, you get the closing. But you start talking about all these incentives and tax credits and whatnot, I mean, you really have to start through Tax Credit 101. They have seminars, conferences, classes, the whole 9 yards. But even then, you know, they equip you with enough to be dangerous so you can go screw a deal up. And so the best way to learn it is to be either partner with somebody who's already experienced, and you will learn through the years, or you're working for a developer that, you know, has a division or specializes 100% in affordable housing.